over the last few years, we have become known as the referendum party rather than the party of independence. And we need to take every and all opportunities to boost support for independence. I obviously think that the arguments speak for themselves, but we need to persuade a greater number of people in Scotland to see independence as the way to a better future. So if I'm elected leader, what I'm proposing is, first of all, an independence delivery plan which would be implemented, which is designed to maximise and boost support for independence. Call it a campaign team with a mission to persuade and to ensure that as many people as possible are being reached. I think that requires a leader who can speak to and reach out to those that voted no last time. So it's important that we bring on side those that voted yes, as well as those who voted no. And in terms of that plan has got to be informed also by members. So I think for too long, it perhaps has been too few people in the SNP making those plans for independence. And we need to make sure that that delivery plan is informed by our members as well.
So would there be a special conference? You know, the idea of the special conference?
I certainly think that could be part of it. Mm-hmm. That could be part of it. Mm-hmm. But I think it needs to go beyond that. Mm-hmm. Because with a membership of over 100,000, as well as, of course, the wider Yes movement, one conference won't allow everybody to have their say. And I think we need to ensure that we are using the skills, the talents, the ideas of the wider membership to inform that, because they're the ones with the ideas, and they're also very reflective of Scottish society. You know, SNP members are diverse. Scottish society is diverse. They're the ones that are interacting with fellow citizens on a daily basis. They know what will persuade no voters to vote yes. So we need to unlock that potential as well. We also, I think, need to start being more ambitious about what the first 10 years of an independent country looks like. And that would be an approach which was to set out, of course, transitional arrangements, which seems to have been the focus of previous policy papers and the focus of a lot of debate in the past. But actually getting beyond that, how do we eradicate poverty in Scotland with the tools of independence? Because I believe we can. Mm-hmm. But that comes down to the policy decisions that a government will make, and how within 10 years do we ensure that Scotland's economy matches our comparator countries in terms of being wealthier, fairer and greener, and how do we unlock the potential of Scottish industry with a view to eradicating poverty and reaching those families that haven't yet been reached with the powers of devolution.
So would that be a kind of entirely new kind of white paper almost, and when would that be published, would you carry on with the independence papers that have already been published?
It would be a programme of work, again informed by SNP members, and would need to be approved by SNP members as well. I would like to see it being written by the party and not by the British Civil Service, because I think it's important that paper, that programme, reflects again the policy ideas of our members. Everybody who's a member of the SNP or who believes in independence does so for a reason. Independence is not an end in and of itself. It's a means to an end. For some, it is a means to building a fairer society. For others, it's a means of dealing with some of the issues that exist, for example, the energy market. But we need to be listening to our members, and I think we need to completely change the approach of papers being written by just a few people in Holyrood, and change that to basically empowering members to inform that.
So would that be written and published by the next election, the next UK election?
We would
foresee that?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
we would do that so that we could put that to the electorate at the next Westminster election. Mm-hmm. Because one of the asks in our programme would be that if the SNP win a majority of seats at the next UK government election, that would be a mandate for entering negotiations with the UK government to transfer the power. But all the conversations to date seem obsessed with process. And the process is not half as important as the support for independence. And so the main focus would be on maximising that support for independence. There are so many people who believe in Scotland prospering and flourishing. they can be persuaded to vote for independence if we demonstrate that Scotland's better days are ahead with independence. But we've got to get out there, make that case, demonstrate through competent government and competent leadership that we are the party that will lead Scotland to better days.
And so, why have you gone for the majority, the SNP majority vote majority of seats instead of the other approach, which would be to have a majority of votes encompassing all pro-Indy parties? So, why have you taken the seats approach instead of the kind of votes approach with all the other Indy parties?
Because historically, that's the way elections work. That a party will put its manifesto to the people, and the party that wins the most number of seats will be the party that forms the government. Now, obviously, in a Westminster election, that's different because we're not looking to form a government in a Westminster election. We are looking to receive the backing of the Scottish people for our manifesto. And in our manifesto, we would put that mandate to enter negotiations with the UK government to have the power transferred.
So that mandate is won and it's successful, and you obviously enter negotiations with the UK government to try and win the Section 30 order. What happens if the UK government says no, which, from past record, they seem bound to do, really?
Well, I think there's a number of points. The first, of course, is that with sustained majority support for independence, it becomes a lot harder to say no. And actually, we have UK government ministers on record when it comes to saying that it's not never, but need to show support. And I think maximising that support, I'm ambitious for the independence movement. I don't think we should set our sights as low as 50+1. I think we should be ambitious to see a majority of people in Scotland want independence. I think that lends itself to a far more successful country when it comes to the first few days of independence. So that would be my approach, to maximise support for independence through competent leadership, through a plan that has the confidence of those that might yet need to be persuaded to vote for independence. And with that comes far, far more pressure on the UK government.
And what would that sustained majority look like? Obviously some people have suggested figures of maybe 60% over. So how would you measure that?
I wouldn't put a figure on it, because what I want to see is as many people in Scotland as possible support independence. So I think by putting a figure on it, you limit your sights. We want to see as many people supporting independence as possible. But they've got to understand how that is linked to the cost of living crisis. They want to understand how that's linked to our public services. They want to understand how independence gives us the tools to eradicate poverty. So we need to spell out those arguments a lot more clearly.
Okay. So in terms of working with other independence parties and the movement, how do you bring that all together? How do you, obviously there's quite a lot of divisions at the moment, there's some kind of different approaches and how we should try and get a referendum. So how do you think you'll be able to bring that all together?
So do you think we need an approach that reaches out, that assumes that not all the ideas are within a small group of people in the SNP, but actually there's huge potential and lots of skill sets within the wider Yes movement? So it starts with recognising the need to work together, recognising a lot of the good work that's already gone on across the Yes movement, and ensuring that we have that big tent approach to discussions, sharing information and working together.
And would that be a kind of new Yes Scotland type idea? Is that something that's...
We could, but actually in the spirit of wanting to work together, I guess the first thing I would do is actually go and speak to other leaders within the Yes movement as to what would work in a way that encompasses all the different entities. At the end of the day, the SNP is still the largest entity, so I think we have a responsibility when it comes to leadership, but we don't have a monopoly.
And in terms of, and a plan B or a plan C, if the situation rumbles on where the UK government isn't giving a referendum, what happens next? Is there a longer term plan? Otherwise we'll just be stuck in the same situation again, surely, of wanting a referendum but being told no, you can't have it.
The plan is to maximise support for independence. That, at the end of the day, whilst we've become consumed and fixated on conversations about process because we are all feeling the need for independence urgently, the plan is always the plan. It's the same plan, which is maximising support for independence. I want us to see us shift the dial on independence significantly, not to just be content with polls that fluctuate around the 50% mark, but really increase independence so that communities in rural and remote parts of Scotland see the answer to some of the challenges that they face through independence, so that urban centres like Glasgow and Edinburgh see the opportunities. You know, we've just seen this week the Rishi Sunak proclaiming the virtues of the deal for Northern Ireland in terms of accessing one of the world's biggest single markets, as well as being able to have a close trading relationship with its closest neighbours. You know, that demonstrates how vital it is to be able to access trade in Europe and so on. That to me is an argument that we need to deploy when it comes to independence, so that we can spell out the reasons why independence would lead to Scotland being wealthier, fairer and greener. Because who could argue with Scotland being wealthier, greener and fairer?
And if you win the contest, obviously you'll have quite a full in-tray on the first day as First Minister. So what would be your priority apart from independence? What would be your immediate number one thing that you would want to tackle?
The NHS and the cost of living crisis.
Right, okay. And how would you do that?
On the NHS, I think there's a number of things that we need to do, and we need to do quite urgently. Obviously, the foundation stone of the NHS is that it must continue to be free at the point of need, and I would defend that to the hilt. But I think we need to look again at how we support social care, how we ensure that care is a rewarding career, because if we can ensure that the care sector is as healthy and as strong as it can be, you end up reducing, for example, delayed discharge in the NHS, and also ensuring that we are providing elderly in particular, but adults who need it, with the social care that they need, dealing with the issues that have been identified in the Feely Review about universal standards of care. But when it comes to the NHS, there's two other issues that I think we need to do urgently. The first is empowering our frontline workers to make sure that money is not getting stuck somewhere in bureaucratic layers and levels of the NHS, but is going straight to the front line. And we empower them on the front line by listening to them in terms of the changes that they would make. So it's not a top-down approach, it's a bottom-up approach. And my last suggestion when it comes to the NHS is about recruitment and retention. We know that it's a lot easier to retain medical staff, doctors, nurses, when they've studied in Scotland and perhaps if they've come from Scotland. And we, at the moment, have a cap on medical students, for example. So students applying to Scottish universities from Scotland, I think we need to reconsider that cap and lift that cap so we have more homegrown talent, as it were, because that can only boost the levels of recruitment and retention.
Okay, great. And obviously during the contest so far, there's been quite a focus on issues around your faith, which there's been quite a lot of issues around that. Can you explain, how do you separate your personal beliefs from political life? You know, how do you manage to make that distinction? Is it something you feel really strongly about? How do you then go into the political arena and kind of overlook that, or deal with that?
I refer you to the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough.
I refer you to the last 3 years of delivering budgets that serve all of Scotland's people, irrespective of who they are. I refer you to the last 2 elections that I've won on both occasions with an increased share of the vote in my Highland constituency. And that, to my mind, my track record speaks for itself. And I would serve as First Minister in a way that was similar to how I've served for the last 6 years.
Do you think there's been unfair attention paid to this?
I mean, there's been enormous attention, hasn't there? I've answered more questions on this matter than probably most politicians do in a lifetime. I think I've answered the questions conclusively now, and very keen, I think, for the sake of SNP members and also the wider public, to focus on what is really consuming their attention.
That's great. And in terms of the gender reform legislation, obviously another issue that's cropped up frequently, you said you would seek to amend it rather than necessarily launching a legal challenge against it. So how would you amend it? How would that take place?
If we were independent, and I want Scotland to be independent, we would need to resolve challenges ourselves without recourse to other governments or taking things to court. And so I think that we need to resolve this ourselves. And I think there's a way forward which gives confidence to women and girls that their safe spaces will be protected, as well as avoids stigmatising the trans community further. I think we were starting to get there with the legislation that was passed in December, and I think we can review it further and perhaps try and reduce some of the toxicity in the debate so that it's a lot healthier.
So would there be more consultation on it? Obviously, it's gone through quite a lengthy consultation process already, so would we...
Well, I think there's a number of steps that need to be taken first. So the first is taking legal advice, because, of course, if the UK government hadn't blocked it, then it would be law. So the reason that we're still having this conversation is because the UK government has blocked it. And so understanding what the legal advice is, understanding where perhaps how the bill interacts with the Equalities Act, I think is also important. And that would be our starting position on it. But I think it is important that I and others listen to all the different sides and the different voices in this debate and move it forward.
And what about the argument that it should be challenged because this is the first time the UK government has used a Section 35 order, it's unprecedented, and you don't want to set that as an example for future legislation? What about that argument?
And this is not the first time that the UK government has tried to block a Scottish Parliament election, and they will continue to do this until we are independent. So that is a prime example of why we need independence. But they will continue to do this in terms of the deposit return scheme. They will do it again with other areas. And they will use any means possible to disrupt the work of the Scottish Parliament. I think we need to do two things. One is we need to become independent. We become independent by boosting support for independence. We do that in a way that demonstrates competent government, focusing on the issues that matter in terms of the NHS and cost of living. That's one way. And then the second way is getting out there and making the case for independence. That needs to be our focus as a government, and that is ultimately the only way that we can protect the Scottish Parliament from a UK government that seeks to overturn not just this legislation, but multiple pieces of legislation. And irrespective of whether we win in court, the UK government won't stop.
That's great. Another point, back off Scotland, obviously behind the buffer zones bid, they have said they've written to all the candidates outlining, asking them for their views on certain abortion issues around abortion, and they've had responses from the other candidates, but not yourself. Will you be responding to
I'm sure I will. My emails are in complete meltdown. Every time I log in, I have another 500 unread emails. So I express apologies for that. But yes, obviously I've answered, again, more questions on abortion than probably anyone else.
Obviously the polls last week showed, the early polls showed that you were ahead. Obviously it's quite a lot of undecided voters, but they showed that you were ahead. Were you surprised by that, and why do you think that is?
I think right now the public and SNP members want change. Continuity won't cut it. They want change. And they know that they need a competent leader with a clear plan for delivering independence. That clear plan has got to be built on competence of managing our economy, managing our public services, and eradicating poverty. I have a track record that speaks for itself. People have seen me at work. They understand that I'm fair, that I deliver, and I think that's what they want in a First Minister.